We're grateful to everyone who leaves comments, which helps to inspire and motivate us. Under previous videos about Tayu and Oiran, one of the most frequently asked questions was what are the key differences between them. Both were essentially courtesans, from around 1589 to 1946. But in this video, we'll respond as best we can to your requests for clarification. In the description below, you can see a list of key reference materials, so that you know we did our homework. But before diving into history, let's consider the nature of history itself. As the saying goes, history is written by the winners. By those who hold the reins of power and control the official records of events, especially at a time when literacy was low, and the biggest obstacle to being heard wasn't just an algorithm, with biases buried very deep within its code. Academic historians are bound by duty to work within the limitations of preserved documentary sources, and an extensive catalogue of peer-reviewed literature from the past. It's not easy for them to challenge well-established, popular notions, which can often take decades. Yet, on a daily basis, we all see how current affairs media that seeks to maintain a profitable relationship with wealthy owners, sponsors, and governments sets the news agenda, and decides what are the important stories to tell. Reporting of events that we have witnessed firsthand can often feel like a rewriting of history, before the dust has even settled. But the skepticism with which we all view contemporary media can pose a significant threat to academic careers, if historians follow a similar inclination to apply a healthy degree of suspicion to historical sources. The broadly accepted narrative that human history is a tale of steady progress gave rise to that other popular saying, "The past is a foreign country," and the real motives of historical actors often get lost in a tsunami of well-researched but often speculative details about how life was very different back then. We're persuaded not to apply our knowledge of basic human nature, because people in the past were apparently an entirely alien race. All too often, the undeniable evolution of technology props up the idea that our ancestors weren't preoccupied with same basic hopes, fears, and ambitions. And the stresses of modern life make popular myths about the past seductive, especially appealing tales of chivalry, courtly love, and noble courage. All a welcome escape from contemporary reality. History itself is full of such examples. For the Elizabethan architects of the British Empire, there was a comforting degree of simplicity in the popular idea of the noble savage. But that doesn't mean they weren't prepared to treat indigenous populations as lesser beings, if they dared to stand in the way of progress, which more often than not was largely indistinguishable from profit. As the name of this channel suggests, we're not content to simply regurgitate all the same old clichés about Japanese history and culture. We're not on some kind of woke mission to turn the world upside down, but we believe there are many overlooked treasures in Japan's history and culture that are routinely being lost to the world. A collective willingness to defend the status quo and go along with an unhealthy, rapidly stagnating degree of continuity is a major issue in so many areas of contemporary Japanese life. In the 16th century, life was especially cheap in Japan. Toyotomi Hideyoshi seized control of the Bakufu, or military dictatorship, who continued the prior shogun's campaign to unite Japan, that led to the closing of a period of violent bloody turbulence and constant civil war. In 1585, he created a licensed pleasure quarter, or yukaku, in Osaka, followed by Kyoto in 1589. These licensed districts rounded up prostitutes operating independently to provide comfort for exhausted samurai. Many Asian countries, most especially Korea, continue to protest about the Imperial Japanese Army's use of comfort women during World War II. Those who celebrate Japan's commitment to maintaining traditions perhaps don't consider that this could be an echo of Hideyoshi's earlier use of sex as an antidote to battle fatigue. In 1604, a popular female performer called Izumo no Okuni performed a kabuki dance in Kyoto and attracted a lot of attention. In addition to laying the foundations of kabuki theater, the widespread interest in this event inspired a brothel house in Nijo, owned by the Hayashi family, to build a playhouse on the banks of Kyoto's Shijo River. Here courtesans could show off their entertainment skills 2 or 3 times a year. Does this mean that artistic performances were the primary purpose of courtesans, or is it what we now call clever marketing? Although the performances attracted large crowds, their primary target were wealthy potential customers. Borrowing from the custom for leading no and jururi performers to affix Tayu after their names. Celebrated, high-ranking courtesans with exceptional music and dance skills became known as Tayu. In the modern world, we're accustomed to brothels providing a floor show, but the skill and athleticism required to perform a captivating pole dance isn't seen as proof that sex isn't the primary product on sale. But if your customer base are attempting to shore up their tenuous claim to be the rightful rulers of the whole nation, then it is perfectly logical to assume that providing a degree of cover for their more basic inclinations makes good business sense. There is no reason to assume that the ruling elite were any less inclined to protect their public reputation than the monarchs, presidents, and billionaires of our own era. And to assume that men brutalized by a century of vicious conflict didn't indulge in the comfort on offer is a story that belongs on the Disney Channel, not this one. Economics tells the real story. Despite astronomical prices, Kyoto's brothels were highly prosperous until the end of 17th century. Without a steady stream of customers drawn from royalty, court nobility, feudal lords and high-ranking townspeople, the yukaku would be a minor footnote in history. But of course you don't attract such distinguished customers unless you are offering rare luxury goods that require time and investment to produce. According to an old book called Shikido Okagami, 10-year-old girls were selected to be maids and housekeepers to high-ranking Tayu. During their 4-year apprenticeship, these girls would learn through experience how to behave, use appropriate language, and interact with customers, as well as acquiring skills in various cultural activities, such as playing instruments or calligraphy. At 14, they would be expected to have customers of their own. What makes a clear differentiation between Tayu and Oiran less than clear are the regional variations in marketing strategies. In 1603, Tokugawa Ieyasu moved the capital from Kyoto to his own territory, the area occupied by modern Tokyo, that was then known as Edo. We all feel safer on home turf, don't we? Especially when there are forces abroad that make us feel constantly vulnerable. But protecting oneself from external forces is pointless if those closest to you become restless. In 1617, the largest yukaku in Japan was opened in Yoshiwara. This walled pleasure quarter was surrounded by a moat and best accessed via riverboat. It was known as Wukiyo, or the floating world, a place to drift and forget your troubles. This gated community was as keen to keep out casual intruders as it was to prevent terrified young girls from escaping. Businesses, both now and then, don't incur costs that aren't necessary. Walled off from prying eyes, perhaps the most perverse and publicly embarrassing sexual proclivities could be indulged, safely hidden away from the public gaze. Idle gossip could be countered with an official narrative that elites went to the place simply to indulge their thirst for high-minded cultural pursuits, and not the promise of carnal liaisons with carefully manufactured celebrities. Imitating the brothels in Kyoto, perhaps to help ensure that relocated retainers felt right at home, the elite courtesans of Yoshiwara adopted the title of Tayu. Written in 1735, Yama Beni Wuguisu tells us that the cost of inviting these elite Yoshiwara courtesans to dinner was 35 monmet, equivalent to the cost of a master carpenter for 35 days, or 466 bowls of soba noodles. Customers would also be expected to pay the cost of food and drink, as well as the rate of everyone else involved in creating the party atmosphere, such as shamisen players and singers. With their distinctive parades and celebrity status, Tayu in Yoshiwara were the sole preserve of elite samurai, feudal lords, and later, powerful merchants. Women belonging to the second highest rank were given the title Kooshi, which means cage girls. This derives from the fact that they were forced to sit in a wooden cage, facing the road to attract customers. Their price was around 25 monmet, or 25 days' work, from a master carpenter. In Kyoto and Osaka, these lower-ranked women were called tenjin. In Kyoto, court nobles and feudal lords were the primary customers for both Tayu and tenjin, whereas in Osaka, it was often wealthy merchants. In the modern world, billionaire sponsorship and appreciation of the arts is a valuable PR tool. It's something that is consciously and publicly to show what a cultured and empathetic human being the sponsor is. Perhaps even a way to offset whatever less savory practices may have been necessary to accumulate so much wealth. Japan's attitudes to sexuality have always been more open, relaxed, and free from the influence of religious doctrine, which elsewhere turned even the most basic interactions between consenting adults into guilty pleasures. So ask yourself this question. If sex with these celebrity courtesans was not on the menu, then why go to the expense of building a gated community out of town? Why not publicly advertise your wealth and status by showing appreciation for their creative skills, in full view of the wider public? In 1657, Yoshiwara was destroyed by fire. It was relocated and rebuilt in Osaka on the banks of the Sumida River as Shin-Yoshiwara, which means New Yoshiwara. This is the gateway to Tokyo's East End, the working-class district known as Shitamachi, that was home to a growing number of merchants. Reconstruction seems to have taken long enough for numerous independent prostitutes to begin operating illegally in tea houses and other entertainment establishments throughout Edo. Following a government crackdown in 1668, they were forced to work in Shin-Yoshiwara, swelling the ranks of the sancha, which was the name for third-class prostitutes. A lower rank was also established during this period. Kiramise were tenement-dwelling women in their 30s with long careers, who cost the equivalent of only 6 bowls of soba noodles. Throughout the Edo period, the value of gold and silver fell, leading to significant levels of inflation. In 1735, the price of a Shin-Yoshiwara Tayu rose from 35 to 82 monmet, or 410 bowls of soba noodles. Kooshi cost 60 monmet, and sancha 28 monmet. In Kyoto, the price of elite Tayu rose to 51 monmet, and tenjin 28 monmet. While in merchant-dominated Osaka, the price of Tayu was around 45 monmet, and tenjin 20 monmet. Although this was the peak of the Edo period, both culturally and economically, the financial difficulties of feudal lords and elite samurai families were beginning to stack up. Few could still afford the luxury of Tayu, who were simultaneously becoming celebrity trendsetters, thanks to highly popular ukiyo-e print sales. In the mid-17th century, there were 71 Tayu in Yoshiwara, which by the end of 18th century had fallen to 0. Simultaneously, the second-ranked Koosi also disappeared. Forced to adapt to socio-economic changes in the outside world, it is at this point that Oiran enter our story, as brothel owners begin establishing a titular system among the sancha, who had previously been the courtesans ranked in third place. To appeal to increasingly cash-rich merchants who were fast becoming Yoshiwara's primary customers, the sancha were subdivided in order of value into yobidashi, chusan, and tsukumawashi. The yobidashi and chusan adopted the custom of parading through the streets with retainers and apprentices when called upon by a customer. What would become known as oirandochu. Young girls apprenticed to Tayu and Koshi had always referred to them as Oira no Anajuro, or my big sister courtesan. In Yoshiwara, this was shortened to Oiran, to denote the new elite courtesans, who due to market forces, were replacing the unaffordable Tayu, and adopting the big sister role, in the training of a new generation of indentured children. However, in Kyoto and Osaka, they retained the established titles of Tayu and Tenjin, until 1946, when the brothels closed. There is no reliable documentary evidence to confirm or deny claims that Kyoto Tayu never had sex with their customers. Of course, throughout the years of military dictatorship that ended with the Meiji Restoration, Kyoto remained the home of the imperial family, revered as direct descendants of the sun goddess. It is reasonable to assume that any risk of people hearing that they or their retainers shared the human failings of mortal men would be very carefully managed. But if you know of any reliable sources that prove this point one way or the other, then do let us know in the comments. Despite the glitz and glamour associated with both Tayu and Oiran, we should be clear that whether they did or did not have sex with customers, they were a vital part of the yukaku that condemned thousands of children to a life of sexual slavery. Brothel owners were known as bohachi, or forgotten eight, which meant a person who had forgotten all basic human virtues. Their houses were known as kukai, meaning a world of suffering. Zagain, or recruitment scouts, would scour poor rural areas, and lie, cheat, and kidnap suitable girls. And at the time, entire families would be punished for minor crimes committed by the head of a household, making shogunate prisons a rich source of children and young women guilty by proxy, who could be raped and sold onto the brothels for a modest fee. These are uncomfortable facts, and a million miles away from the modern Tayu, who entertain tourists with perfectly innocent recreations of what were essentially the ostentatious marketing strategies of Dickensian monsters. In the global history of arts and science, the contribution of women is criminally underrepresented. Therefore, it would be wonderful to assume that Tayu, unlike Oiran, were such consummate artists that wealthy elites were willing to pay vast sums to enjoy a private performance of traditional arts, and nothing more. But no matter how much we want to see the past as a foreign country, a fantasy world of genteel nobility and unshakable honor, it is simply not credible. The idea that hardened battle-weary men were content with an overpriced song and dance party goes against everything we know about human nature. If recent history in our supposedly more civilized era has taught us one thing, it is that the most powerful people in our societies are second only to the most vocal moralizers, when it comes to questionable behavior behind closed doors. Ask a dominatrix who her best customers are, and she'll give you a long list of politicians and other high-ranking individuals with a deep-seated need to throw off the burden of power, even for a short period of time, and be submissive. The proclivities of successive American presidents and church leaders are well reported. And the highly organized, well-funded exploitation of minors by Jeffrey Epstein comes with a long list of alleged fellow travelers, from billionaires to royal princes. For all its quaint customs and ornate costumes, the history of Japan's sex industry includes some of the most harrowing routine abuse of children imaginable. And a refusal to acknowledge this often means that contemporary forms of exploitation, such as the predatory sexual behavior of managers behind popular underage girl and boy bands, is simply too unimaginable and slips quietly under the radar for many years. Establishing clear precedents is important, and if history is ever going to become a true story of progress, their role is essential. We hope that we've answered your questions and provided food for thought where conclusive documentary evidence is lacking. At the same time, whatever you call the grooming of children on an industrial scale, and however you dress it up, the legacy of this colorful world of suffering is evident in the present. In 2020, Shiori Ito, a young journalist and filmmaker, was named one of the 100 of most influential people in the world by Time magazine. Her book, Black Box, highlights the difficulties she experienced after accusing the reporter on one of Japanese key TV networks, who was close to ex-Prime Minister, of rape. For far too long, Japan has used tradition, cultural preservation, and the importance of quietly maintaining the status quo as an excuse for not addressing long overdue societal issues, despite pressure from other developed nations. When thinking about the Tayu and Oiran of times past, it is important to consider to what extent their pain and suffering also remains largely hidden in a systemically corrupt black box. Thank you for watching.